What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Pure EVil MMA. I'm here after a crazy afternoon. I can't even say night. Well, now that it's getting into the night, I guess I could. But it was another weird one, just like it was last year with Bisping versus Silva. I am here doing a live stream with you guys, and in case you're listening to the podcast, we do this after every UFC event. I'm Evil Eddie, your host for the night from Pure EVil MMA and also frontproofmedia.com. Shout out to my boy Nick, who's actually at World Series of Fighting right now, covering those fights, which are going to be going on right now on NBC. After this, I'm going to be hopping on Twitter at Pure Evil MMA. You can follow me and also Nick at NREMTB, who's actually there right now. But let's jump right into the UFC London card here. There were a couple of fights that got called off. Wale Bamboje, who I got to speak with before the fight, actually, who was very motivated to go in there, coming out of the Bronx, New York here. I've spoke with him before in the past. Very inspiring fighter, very inspiring guy. But 18 minutes before the Lena Landsberg fight, for some reason, his opponent had to drop out of the fight, which is very upsetting. Tom Breeze, of course, who's from that part of the world over there across the pond in London. So there are a lot of upset people in that one. Also, there was another card that was shut down as well. But let's jump right from the top here. I'm sure that's where you guys all want me to start. Anderson versus Manuwa. So it all started when they were walking out, making their walk to the octagon. You got Anderson coming out first, who came into some little, why can't I think of the name? Some fucking Richard. Oh my God, why can't I think of who he came into? Either way, then you had Manuwa come into a little Tupac. I know who that is, of course. So right off the bat, if people were judging the fight right off that, say if we're judging this off of just the walkout, Manuwa wins, which I gotta agree on that one. But as we got into the fight, this fight ended in the first round. The whole time Manuwa was running around just trying to load up with that one, that left hook. Anderson with that beautiful footwork. If you guys listen to Dan Hardy's breakdown of what Manuwa needed to watch out for, was Anderson's footwork and, of course, his wrestling game. Remember him from season 19 of Ultimate Fighter. But right off the bat, this fight went down real quick. Anderson gets dropped with a solid walk-off knockout by Manuwa, who just really nailed it with that left hook and just stumbled him and then just dropped. Could have guessed it from the walkout, but I guess some people did, which is absolutely crazy. So Anderson not moving forward here, unfortunately. Manuwa getting the win with the KO walk-off knockout, just like a Mark Hunt knockout, just like the Frank Mir knockout. So, all right, Gunnar Nelson versus Alan Jouban. Another nervous fight. I get nervous every time both these guys step in there, especially Alan Jouban. Talked with him before his Bilal Muhammad fight, and I told you guys, he looks amazing usually in the first and second round with his karate, his striking game. But I was nervous about Gunnar Nelson's, his stand-up, of course, which is very similar to Conor McGregor since he trains over there. Even though he's from Iceland, he's training in Ireland with SBG. But as soon as it gets to the ground is what you got to watch out with Gunnar Nelson, who is coming off a win. But before that, he lost to a submission specialist in Damian Maia. I think he learned a lot in that fight. And, after facing that, it's like a lot of people will say, once they go to a traumatic experience or even just like going off a roller coaster for the first time, you're never afraid again. So why would Alan Jouban, inflict anything that Gunnar Nelson needs to worry about if he brought him to the mat? Gunnar Nelson displayed an amazing stand-up style as well, just waiting, being very patient, picking his shots, and he cracked Alan Jouban. He gets him in the first with a beautiful takedown, lands a solid right hand, and then drops Alan, and then keeps it back a little bit and lands it perfectly with a kick, and then finishes off getting him to the ground and getting the submission win. Allen was just absolutely gone and wasn't there. You just saw him as soon as he was hit with that solid right hand. Jouban just did that chicken dance, and he gets so nervous at that point. I feel so bad for Kara Bryant, who was probably at the edge of her seat as well in that fight. And like I said, I get nervous every time both these guys fight because I want them both to win. But when looking at this on paper and being so familiar with both these guys, I had to give the edge towards Gunnar Nelson because I know that he'd probably match Allen on the feet. Allen trying to keep that distance, and Gunnar was really putting on the pressure and really kind of panicking Jouban, making him dance around with his back against the cage, and Gunnar just went in for it. Was able to land that right hand, drop him, and get the submission win. So another amazing fight for Gunnar Nelson moving forward, and exactly what we expected here at Pure Evil MMA. Also, Ted Jett called it, and Jeff Stinson called it as well. Guys, we have some winners on the Pure Evil MMA Army for the UFC Pick'em, which was kind of weird. And we got our chat room, of course, here, guys. And Hill joining us again on our post-fight show. What's going on, Ann? I'm going to be getting into our MMA, Pure EVil MMA Army Pick'em winners here. And we're going to be getting that in just a second. But I had to say, on your defense, Ann, it was kind of weird. We all tried messaging UFC Pick'em, because that's where we have our league. That's where we kind of base the show off of with that segment. And they only had 3 rounds for that main event, Manuwa versus Anderson. So did they know something? Did they know it wasn't going to go past that 3rd round? But no, seriously, fights are always 5 rounds after that Shogun versus Hendo fight. We'll never forget that one. And ever since then, they changed it. Every main event has to be 5 rounds. So I don't know why UFC Pick'em made that mistake, unless they knew something was in the works there, giving us a little hint. I actually had this fight going for Anderson. I thought that his wrestling and his footwork were going to be able to, get this fight. And unfortunately, it did not go that way. And then we were just talking about the Alan Joban, Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson getting the submission in the second round. It was the second round that he got the submission win. I actually had Gunnar winning that first, but Alan didn't do too bad. In the fight before that, this was a huge upset as Brad Pickett made his last walkout of the octagon, and it was so sad just on the fact he walked out with his hat on. He was training at ATT down at American Top Team in South Florida. I talked with Charles Rosa, who is going to be fighting at UFC 210. You guys can go check that out at Pure EVil MMA on Twitter and iTunes. And Ann's in the chat room saying our internet was out. That's such a shame. Well, don't worry, because we're going to be giving you the updates right here. So Brad Pickett makes his walkout, was winning the 1st and 2nd round, and this was even confirmed not on just our cards, but also on the official scorecards. They had Brad Pickett up 10 both rounds, making it 20-18 going into the 3rd. There was less than 90 seconds left. I think it was about the last 60 seconds where Vera just delivered a couple of combos and then turned it up in the 3rd, getting that kick knockout. But let's rewind a little bit, going back to that first. Vera delivered amazing combos and knees and caught Pickett a couple of times, but Pickett was just so headstrong. He wasn't going out. He had a way of, he knew this fight was going to go, and he wasn't going to get knocked out. Yeah, at least he didn't think at that time. But big takedown in the first for Pickett, dropping Vera with a left hook. And, he got on top of Vera in the 2nd round and was landing some devastating elbows on him as well. But Vera was not going away. He kept pouring it on that entire fight. 3rd round, less than a minute left, I believe, and just lands solid, ice cold leg kick, dropping Pickett, and he looked like he was still aware, like he might have been out unconscious as he was falling, but as soon as his back hit the mat, it looked like he was aware. Vera gets on top and just started rocking him, and you can clearly see Pickett's eyes roll back. I think it was the 2nd strike there, and the ref goes in, calls the fight off. Pickett immediately got up, but you can tell as soon as he was trying to argue with the ref, he was just, his equilibrium was off, and he was doing the chicken dance for a second there. And then he was like, shit, I was out, wasn't I? And he was very upset. And unfortunately, he didn't get the win. Not the way everybody wanted it to go. There was a standing ovation there. And we got another guest here in the chat room. We got the MMA Holes joining us. He kissed his neck. And I took some great pictures after that fight with Brad Pickett behind Vera, just shaking his head upset, and Vera was pouring his eyes out like he didn't even want to really win that fight, but he was going to deliver what Brad wanted, which was a solid last fight, and Pickett definitely got that. No love lost on the side of Brad Pickett, not on our books. So guys, we got the MMA Holes here joining us along with Ann Hill from the Pure EVil Army here. Why don't you guys give them a follow on Twitter? Guys, follow Ann at ChillZone95 and also the MMA Holes. I'm not 100% what the Twitter handle is. Why don't you drop that really quick, MMA Holes? I'll share that with my podcast audience and also here on the live stream for everybody. So, all right, guys, this was not what we wanted, but at the same time, Brad Pickett has left his mark inside the octagon. This always happens for this guy, unfortunately. Remember that fight that he had with Thomas Almeida, who was a rising prospect at the time, and honestly, he was winning most of that fight as well, and what happened? He got cracked and was submitted. He cracked Thomas Almeida, goes to the ground, and got submitted. And that's something that we were telling you guys to look out for on the pregame show with Ted Check. You're like, if there's one thing that we got to worry about in this fight, which Pickett avoided the entire time, landing takedowns and surviving a lot of those significant strikes, it was the submission. And what happened? He didn't even get submitted. He got knocked out standing up on the feet, which I was totally shocked there. So I was totally upset. But Brad Pickett, man, you've left your mark inside the octagon. You put everything into this fight, going down to American top team, training in America to fight over in your homeland and put on a great show. And brother, you did. So shout out to you from Pure EVil MMA. We wish you the best on the next part of your journey here. But first round, second round, I had for Pickett, and the judges agreed there. So that was a confirmation. It's out to Sean Alshani. Shout out to Alshanti for shooting that out. All right, so the Amir Khani fight versus Allen, Grapple City. That's all that fight was, just like expected. Some beautiful hands, left hands in the third by Allen, really pouring it on. We can scoop by that. Duffy versus Madadi. Now, this was a fight that I got to talk about here because Madadi, and I tweeted out some pictures that were straight on point of him looking just like the God of War. We saw Duffy, who was really riding off that win over Conor McGregor about 5 years ago. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that's something that they always like to bring up. Duffy had his chance. We're going to jump in the fight in a second, but Duffy had his chance when he was going up against Dustin the Diamond Poirier. And I feel so bad for Duffy because he's always stuck on these cards on UFC Fight Pass, which is totally a shame because he really deserves more out of the UFC because he does put on exciting fights. He has a fascinating style, and this was the last fight on his contract, I believe, before the UFC was going to decide to let him go. If you look at his performance tonight, how could you let this guy go? Madadi is no joke on the feet. He was giving him, a run for his money, but Duffy, training at TriStar Gym, just poured on a beautiful elbow that cracked open Madadi, pouring down the center of his face. And as that fight moved on, he just kept opening it back up, and he just could not see out of his eye. He was wiping the blood from his face, and Duffy was trying to land some phenomenal kicks. Where's my word paper? I got a pretty cool piece of paper that has a whole bunch of words where I can just switch it up real quick, so I don't say too many of the same things over and over again for you guys. Because I did have a little party tonight for myself here. All right, so we got Mike Hill in the chat room now. Why don't you guys, help me out here with, what you thought of these fights. Mike saying hi to the family, and shout out to you, Pickett, going to miss you. And that's a shame. MMA Holes, what's up, Ed? At MMA Holes, if you want to see stupidity. And shout out to you, man. I saw that you were doing some work inside the cage over at CES, where you got to meet some of my MMA family here from the East Coast. Shout out to Nutmeg MMA and the rest of the guys, Combat Sports Nation, Domenico 101, and the rest of the MMA media here from the East Coast. Adalia McDina taking some of the best photos in MMA. All right, so moving forward here, Duffy, don't let this guy go. Don't let him go. UFC has to be crazy to let this dude go. You can't really work on that fight with Conor McGregor. I think he's taken a couple steps back since that. If you came into UFC, won 3 fights straight, and he was working towards it. Once he got to that Dustin the Diamond fight, that's really where the level was compared because Dustin lost to Conor McGregor. So they were basing it off of that. And fortunately, he didn't win that fight, but he put on an amazing performance tonight. And if he's staying at TriStar Gym, there's some beautiful things that we can expect from Joe Duffy. But we have to hear from him what he wants to do because he did tweet out he doesn't know what's next for him on his journey. And I think that's a good card for him to play. But honestly, guys, UFC is still where you want to be. I mean, if they're not going to ante up on your contract, it is frustrating. But that's where you're going to get the most promotion. That's where you're going to get the most love from the fans. And that's the right place to be at this day and age. Especially, you still have that win over Conor McGregor. They can still play that, even though we're tired of hearing that. But you got a great win tonight, man. So shout out to you. Maybe we'll try to get him on the show here. I'll get one of these guys on the show for you for episode 41 of Pure Evil MMA. And speaking of, if you guys are just tuning in, Bambo J, who we spoke to right before tonight, was called off of his fight against Tom Breeze 18 minutes before the first fight with Lena Landsberg, which is very weird because within 20 minutes, like before the fight start, if you're not out of the fight within 20 minutes, usually it's on. The card is solid, it's going forward, and all the bets are locked in. I don't know what exactly happened, but that fight was called off, and that's such a sad thing to hear for Bambo J. This is the second time that happened to him. His last opponent, Josh Salmon, God rest his soul, rest in peace. He passed away last October for their fight in December. So now this is the second time for Owale Bambo J. He's going to have to fly back here to the Bronx and take his next step forward. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to get the win, but hope he enjoyed tonight's fights. Shout out to Owale moving forward here. All right, so Barroso getting the win over Stewart, winning in decision there. Johnson versus Omielanchuk. Johnson was doing an amazing job at the beginning of every round. Beginning of the first, beginning of the second, beginning of the third. But at the end of the first, at the end of the second, at the end of the third, he was just grinding out wrestling. We did see the rule changes tonight. I mean, a lot of people didn't agree with the first fight of the night, which we're going to be rewinding back to in a minute. But Johnson going in there with his mustache. Big shout out to the mustache. Getting the win there. I had him actually losing the first round, winning the second and the third. But amazing sportsmanship shown by the two as a mouthguard was knocked out. Amazing wrestling game from Johnson like expected. Great speed early, and then it faded for Omielanchuk. Working the right eye, and the judges scored this fight 28-29, 30-27, and then 29-28 for Johnson. And that's who I picked to win this fight. All right, moving backwards. And there's some amazing fights. Usually on cards, as they build up, especially for these UFC Fight Pass cards here, early on, you don't see too many amazing fights. Not the case tonight. The card delivered in London. You could feel it right off the bat from the first fight. And I know we're working back here, but that was a request by our fans at Pure EVil MMA. All right, so Edwards versus Luque. Not what I expected. Luque coming off that season Ultimate Fighter as a big showstopper on a couple fight win streak in his last fight. Stunning Bilal Muhammad, knocking him out. UFC 205. We spoke with Bilal before that fight. He was originally supposed to fight someone else that actually trains with Owale. Speaking of the devil, the Holy War Angel, that devil? Nah, that didn't go together there. But Luque getting the win, knocking out Bilal Muhammad at UFC 205, taking that fight on short notice. Now coming in here against Edwards, huge over there across the pond. Very slow start to this fight. Great grappling. Luque getting top control, ending that first round, but Edwards comes back in the second and third, taking that fight, breaking down Luque. Not much else to say there. Wasn't really the most exciting fight. If you're, tuning in hoping to get, if it's your first couple of times watching MMA, you don't know what's really going on the ground. Not what I expected. I thought Luque would do a little bit more on his feet. Some of you guys might be surprised about that. But with this one, I really expected that. All right, so here's my fight of the night. The one right before this. Takashi. Going in there like an animal, the Bone Crusher. I spoke with him a couple of times via Snapchat leading up to this fight because he actually was training with Brad Pickett, Charles Rosa. And we spoke with Charles Rosa, and he was like, Ed, you got to follow my boy Bone Crusher on Snapchat. He has a great story. I'll actually take the picture for you guys and share it because you definitely got to follow this guy. So I was talking with him, and he was so dead serious leading up this entire week. And you could see it at the weigh-ins. They went in there, and he wasn't playing any games against his opponent. Wasn't trying to, do the sportsmanship. He was trying to put on a great show, and he was feeling it too. And as he got there, he wanted to put on a great show for his fans. And he was supporting the Red Mohawk, which we all know Dan Hardy is the real representative of that. Well, actually, I am too. I've actually had a Mohawk since I was a little kid. So, you weren't the first one doing it, man. Shout out to all my Lost Boys out there that do rep that. Shout out to that Rufio look right there. And, the rest of Neverland. All right, but Takashi getting that knockout in 30 seconds with that spinning kick. Or no, he went in there, got a spin kick, trying some crazy stuff early on in the first 10 seconds. But as we got to the 30-second part, he just dropped him with, I believe it was a left or a right hand. What's going on in the chat room here? Dang, I missed a good fight card. And saying, Mike Hill, we missed the fights. That's too bad. You know what? World Series of Fighting is going to be on tonight, so I can join in on that with you. Net was out for us. That sucks, Ann. So the MMA hole is saying, typo, UFC London. UFC Loden. UFC London. Let me fix that for you. Good call out. And you know what? That's something I really need to be careful about if I want to be, taken seriously as a professional MMA correspondent. I did go to broadcasting school, but I'm still so bad with my typos when I'm trying to do these live streams and get everything up to you. So shout out to my MMA media family for help. UFC Loden. We're going out to UFC London. My dog's sitting over here looking at me like, what is he doing? Who is he talking to? Shout out to my little man Oscar here. Kick ass, yeah, 30-second KO in the first round, and he actually was able to get the seal in with the red mohawk now moving forward, because Dan Hardy before the fight was saying, I see you rocking the mohawk, but that's my dig, yo. And if you're going to come into London supporting that, you better get a knockout faster than my 90-second knockout that I had here at the O2 Arena. He went in there, 30-second KO, stunning the crowd. Everybody got up, and from that moment on, you knew it was going to be an amazing fight, because even before that, shit was serious between the Askham versus Scott fight. Very weird, because in that fight, Askham had an injured foot. I think it was his right foot. I'm pretty sure it was his right foot. It looked like he may have sprained it, or maybe a little more serious than that. I might even thought that he sprained his ankle or broke his foot. I wasn't exactly sure, but he was still going in there with some combos, actually being able to control the fight. But the first round was definitely rough for Askham, as Scott was going in there, pouring on the pressure, was able to get a lot of leg kicks on him, and rocked Askham very early on in that fight. He was actually working with a mind coach, and that's something that I'm very interested in. Trying to reach out to one of those mind coaches out there to kind of figure out what they're doing, working with the fighters, what they work on with the fighters, and how they keep that mindset. I think that's very interesting. I actually went to college for sociology and psychology, so now that I'm doing my MMA thing, I totally want to get a couple of those guys on the show and see what they're working with. A big thing in MMA last year was the movement coaches, and then we've been seeing mind coaches for a while. GSP worked with his mind coach after the Matt Serra fight, after losing that, to make that comeback that he did in Matt Serra versus GSP2. And this is something that I want to get for you guys here on the show. Shout out to the MMA Hole's wife saying that he didn't notice, but my wife did with that eagle eye. Man, I need to get my girl in here, or somebody to help me out with all that I do here. I make a typo and it can throw a lot off with people here being taken as a professional. So that's something I definitely want to look out for moving forward. But this was an exciting fight, Askham, being able to put it on and get the win here. No. Whoa. Scott got the win over Askham. I'm sorry. But they started trading shots in the second because he broke his foot in the second round, but was able to somehow survive it. I mean, I think Scott at one point, if he didn't win this fight, he would have regretted that moment in the second round where he did hurt him and didn't pour it on. But sometimes you can get caught for that. And Askham was able to put things together but not win the fight. On my card, I had it scored first round for Scott, second round for Askham, and then the third round was so close. It really came down to that. Third round I had for Askham, but Scott ended up winning that. He was so excited when he heard it. He took off his hat, smashed it on the ground, and was celebrating his night. It kind of seemed like it caught him off guard. Askham thought he did enough. And it's such an amazing thing when you see these fighters go through that battle in their mind. Breaking a foot, I mean, think about the pain that you're going through. You got to block that out. You're in the middle of a fight. This is your career. You've been working months and months and months for this moment, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to seal the win. But no love lost here at Pure EVil MMA for Askham. Congratulations to Scott, but I thought that he faded in the second and third. I really did, and I thought that was going to be what came in for Askham, showing that he was able to get over the broken foot or the sprained ankle, and was able to adjust like we see in that championship mentality. So big shout out to him for that. First fight of the night, and it was Lena Landsberg, who had a short notice fight against Pudilova. I love that name. And this was actually a rematch, guys. Their first fight happened before the UFC, of course. This was Lena Landsberg, bantamweight debut here in the UFC. Her first fight was going up against Chris Cyborg. And you would think that she fought her again tonight if you saw the photos. Pudilova, we got to give that girl a lot of credit. She was very upset after the fight, after she found out she didn't win. I don't think she did speak that language. I don't think she knew what Lena Landsberg was saying, because as this fight was called, Lena Landsberg was like, listen, Pudilova's the real champion here. We did see the new rule changes tonight as well, so you got to look at the some of those changes that went into effect here. But Lena Landsberg was landing some vicious knees and was really connecting on the distance, but Pudilova was able to put it together in the first round, I thought, and actually in the third I thought she was doing very well. Landsberg really gassed towards the end of that third round, and she was busted up, man. She was going around looking really busted, as if Chris Cyborg was laying into her once again. But this is a girl coming in here to the UFC trying to make an impact. Did she make an impact in the minds of all of you guys, is what I want to know. I was trying to get Lena Landsberg on. I spoke with her before the fight, trying to get her on episode 40 for you guys alongside Bambo J. Unfortunately, with all the late notice fights and the opponent changes, she wasn't able to do it. So she ends up getting the win here. And unfortunately, we don't know what's next for Pudilova, but in my book, I thought she made an impressive debut, even though she didn't get the win. But congratulations, guys. I thought this was an amazing card, all in all. If you didn't catch it on UFC Fight Pass, I keep telling you, you got to get UFC Fight Pass. That is something that every MMA fan should get. Between every season of Ultimate Fighter, all the UFC documentaries that they have, everything. It's just like the MMA fan category library of like a Netflix for MMA fans. So you're missing out if you didn't get that. Shout out to Duffy. We got to figure out what's next for him. Gunnar Nelson going in there and putting on a show stunner. Brad Pickett, unfortunately, man, you did not get your win. You did have the first. You had the second. You had the standing ovation. Fortunately, you couldn't get the win. And, we wish you the best here. Manuwa, the one-punch, walk-off knockout over Corey Anderson with that left hook. Absolutely amazing. Let's take a question from the chat room here before we end today's show, and I get into the UFC Pick'em winners. All right, so Ann Hill says, as they always say, never leave it in the judge's hands. I thought he would have won. Broken foot and still lost. That sucks for Askham. Yeah, it really does. Unfortunately, that's what happens when you do leave it to the judges, and that's why we all say that. Don't leave it to the judges. But he was able to really survive it, and I think that was the most impressive part of that entire fight. I thought that Scott really faded towards the end of that fight, and that Askham did enough. Unfortunately, we're wrong, and Askham was pouring it on. He kept moving it forward, and that's probably what the judges saw there. He had an amazing power right hand, and he kept working it. He kept working that jab, and it was very clear to me that both guys really faded a lot. But to take into consideration the injury is what's very impressive, how he was able to adjust, like I said before. All right, so Stewart versus Barroso was fun. Johnson was all right. The Duffy fight stood out. The icy elbows of Duffy is something to really take into consideration there. Pickett, Joban going out on a stretcher almost, unfortunately. I was at the edge of my seat. And Gunnar Nelson, what is next for that guy? He's still top 10. Alan Joban, this was a step up for this guy. He wasn't top 10, wasn't even top 15. Gunnar Nelson, really proven that he's one of the more elite guys in that division, training at one of the most badass gyms out there. Manuwa, what's next for him? He wants the winner of UFC 210 DC vs. Rumble, which is coming up next, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Pure EVil MMA. I want to thank you guys for helping me out here in the chat room. Let's give a shout out to our top 10 winners of our UFC Pick'em tonight. And if you were tuning in on the live show here, guys, make sure you're following me on Twitter at Pure EVil MMA and on my personal page at evil_echo. That's EVIL_ECCO. And also frontproofmedia.com. I am looking for sponsors right now. I am open for sponsors. I actually have a huge opportunity. I just got asked by the MyMMAnews.com to go host an event alongside Mickey Gall and what are you doing down there, buddy? And Jim Miller out in Pennsylvania. But the thing is, can I get to Pennsylvania? So I got to figure all that out. But that would be an awesome thing to go out to PA. I know a lot of MMA media out there and do that event, alongside Mickey Gall. So we'll see what happens. All right, so let's jump into our Pick'em winners here for the Pure EVil MMA Hall of Fame. All right, so from 10th place all the way up, I actually made the list. This week coming in 10th place, in 9th, the birthday boy, the Lone Wolf, who probably called every fight tonight by first round knockout. Pat with 1,490 points on UFC Pick'em. In 8th place, Yusuf, MMA Kush King. Shout out to General Yusuf making the top 10 list here. In 7th place, our co-host here tonight in the chat room, Mike Into the Storm, with 1,665 points. In 6th place, Nick, NREMTB, with 1,715 points. Give him a follow, guys, on Twitter. He's actually ringside on Press Row right now at World Series of Fighting. We're going to be joining him in a minute. Make sure to follow him on Twitter, NREMTB. In 5th place, Disturbed MMA. In 4th, Minion. Congratulations, Minion, making the top. I knew this was a big card for you over there in London. In 3rd, wow, killing it. Absolutely killing it. And Chillzone 95 killing it. She didn't even get to watch the fights, unfortunately. But guess what, Ann? You came in third place. You've been killing it week after week. I think 2 weeks ago, when it was your birthday, you came in first. Last week, I think you were top 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, this week, congratulations, Ann. You came in third place. I hope that brightens up your night here with 1,840 points. In second, Shelly, another top contender here, with 1,870 points. And in first place, and if you guys know who this is, please help me figure it out on Twitter. In first place, we got Max. I don't know if that's Max Power. I'm guessing it is. We're going to have to find out. With 2,915 points. So he pretty much blew everyone out of the water with over 1,000 points more than anyone else. So he probably caught a lot of underdogs, a lot of short notice fights. We're going to have to take a look back on that. I want to thank all of the Pure Evil Army who got to tune in tonight and play along with us in the UFC Pick'em room. And shout out to everyone else on Twitter that joined us with engaging fight after fight. Of course, I was giving live updates throughout the night on our Twitter page at evil_echo, live tweeting for Front Proof Media. And also check out our Facebook page, guys. I did a whole bunch of great interviews this week with the Shamrock FC card. I interviewed the president and CEO of Shamrock FC yesterday about the double KO that appeared on SportsCenter on ESPN. So definitely check that out. There's an event going down next weekend, and it's free on shamrockfc.com. So definitely go and check out those interviews. What else do we got in the mix? Episode number 41 is going to be dropping Monday morning for every guys. That's something we're going to be doing now. Monday, the podcast is going to drop for you guys. We're doing a little bit later in the week because of all the late notice interviews with the UFC fighters. As you guys know, I've been trying to get UFC guys on every week for every podcast for you guys. And if there's anyone out there that just notices my interviews and my tweets, you're missing the real package. The real package is the podcast. That's where all the work goes into. That's where I spend hours in editing and really spicing it up with MMA interviews, UFC fighters on each week, fun segments like Members of the Week, the UFC Pick'em winners, some MMA trivia as well. I know that you guys have been digging that tune in. We've been breaking over 1,000 views and downloads every week, so I want to thank everybody that has been tuning in. I really want to make that top 100 list this year for iTunes and Podbean.com, and we're really making some big moves here at Pure Evil MMA. For anybody out there that's doubting us, bad idea to doubt us. And today, TJ Dillashaw actually signed on to Pure Evil MMA, following us here. And also a couple of UFC guys. You can check that out. Exactly who, because I don't want to name names here. But we're doing it, guys. We're making big moves. We are the new era in MMA media, and I want to thank everybody out there, like the MMA holes, like Ann, like Mike, everyone out there that has been helping us along this journey, and also the MMA media guys out there that is also part of this new era with me alongside MMA here. And we're not going anywhere, guys. We're making that splash, and it's going down now, just like that new era. And I spoke about it in episode 40. It's now. So you know what? I sit here, I turn my cap around backwards. This is where my passion's at. This is what I love to do, and I'm going to give you guys the best every week. I'm Evil Eddie from Pure Evil MMA, frontproofmedia.com. I hope that you guys enjoyed tonight's fights, because I certainly did, and I enjoyed it with you, and that's the best part. So, for everybody at Pure Evil MMA, frontproofmedia.com, I hope that you guys behave yourself. Tune into World Series of Fighting. Subscribe here on iTunes, Podbean, and YouTube. I'm Evil Eddie. Behave yourselves, guys. I'm out. Peace.